A pleasure to meet y'all at last. Welcome back to Films I'm Willing to Talk About Again. So, you know what? We're going to go a little bit deeper into the world of Transformers. More specifically, the Bayverse. It's pretty much the official term that is given to the series of films of Transformers-related live-action material made by Michael Bay. Though more specifically, he held the directing position and was able to create 5 big films. But there have been a number of different things that have gone with them. Whether they were good or bad is more or less up for debate. But a more honest look is technically what they do deserve. And as most people will agree, these films have had their flaws, which is quite unfortunate. While I do love and appreciate them for what they are, and the fact that they exist as a whole, at least they give us a good example of how some things don't need to be live action, it's safe to say that, well, Transformers, it sure had carried on quite a way. But now here we go to the third film of the series, Transformers: Dark of the Moon. As we pretty much come to expect, these films were actually being released on a 2-year basis. You have Transformers in 2007, Revenge of the Fallen in 2009, and then you have Dark of the Moon, which was released in 2011. Now, I could probably name loads of other films that came out around this same exact time. I mean, Harry Potter, The Deathly Hallows, I Am Number 4, The Green Lantern, and even the first Thor film from the MCU came out around that same time as well. So the thing is, 2011 was pretty much a busy year when it came to movies. We even had Hugo, which I've considered to be one of the best in terms of telling old history. Old history that might have been forgotten by this point. But in any case, Dark of the Moon is pretty much what we've come to expect. An intense series of action sci-fi with some suspense and loads of other things that take place. And as we've also come to expect, this is basically another time jump into the future, sometime after the events of Revenge of the Fallen. We have Sam Witwicky, still played by Shia LaBeouf, and still a bit of a coherent character within the series, because after all, this is as close as we could probably get with the likes of Spike Witwicky from G1. But that really just leads us to wonder, when is Spike ever going to become more of a relevant character within the entirety of this continuity? But this is the kind of question that we never truly got an answer for, which is pretty disappointing right off the bat. But in any case though, he went from being a high schooler in the first film to a college student, and now he's basically working at a full-time job in your typical 3-piece suit and tie sort of office building situation in the city of Chicago, Illinois. So, basically speaking, this is someone who's basically grown to be quite a talented and reliable young man. And as we've certainly come around, Shia LaBeouf had definitely grown in terms of his character and also in terms of his acting. Because by this point was when almost everybody wanted to include him in their projects. Though of course he has had some talent and has even been featured in projects before then, it was especially after this point in 2011 when he would basically be under a lot of demand from a lot of people. And well, there were only so many films that he was able to get into. So there was even that speculation where supposedly Transformers had derailed his career, which I almost find it hard to believe, because with these movies making billions of dollars, how does Sam Witwicky's own actor not get as big as he could possibly be today? Well, the truth is, in terms of, well, LaBeouf's career as a whole, especially after Transformers came and went, for him at least, he had gotten several roles throughout the mid to late 2010s, but some of which were forgettable, others were barely recognizable, like Peanut Butter Falcon and Honey Boy from 2019, films that I have enjoyed quite well, even as time went on to this very point in age. But in any case though, Witwicky is basically working as a developer. full time. His boss, known by the name of Wang, is basically a crazy Asian character. Probably not rich. Maybe that could be a Crazy Rich Asians connection. But that's probably up for debate as well. But in any case, Witwicky is able to delve into the world of technology, much like how in Transformers, he was able to get up close and personal with the kind of technological advancements that Cybertronian tech could possibly offer. And with the Autobots' help, he actually was able to get himself into quite a crazy line of work that probably guaranteed him a pretty solid life. And as I've also mentioned before, Megan Fox originally played Mikaela Banes, which was Sam Witwicky's girlfriend at the time. But in Dark of the Moon, he has a new girlfriend. I would suppose that it's because of what had happened with Megan Fox's dismissal by, well, wouldn't you believe, Steven Spielberg. Yeah, of all people that could have possibly fired her, she got laid off by Steven Spielberg. So, I guess that's the reason why they didn't bring back Mikaela Banes by any means, but still, nonetheless, with a new girlfriend, you'd probably hope for a better relationship. But it's hard for me to really point out how well that went down, because there's a lot of things that turn up. For example, the Autobots come across a series of driller encounters. Yeah, and it's basically an advanced weapon that was discovered to be Decepticon related, and they basically take it out only to find out Shockwave was behind this. Yes, we finally get to see Shockwave. Just think, 4 years had passed since the first film. And I'm sure that there's been a lot of demand from various characters from the franchise itself, all continuities and all known dialogue that's been memorable over the years. And we finally get him. Shockwave in this instance, they certainly designed him quite well. And he also has loads of various things in mind. He's heavily armored, quite bulky in a way. In comparison to the G1 version, he does have some slim areas, but the main body himself is pretty chunky. But here, the whole rest of the body is quite swole in a way. But I won't exactly go so far to make such negative critiques on that part. I'd say his design works for what it is, being live action and whatnot. He also has that signature eye on his head. But I guess if there's one thing that's sort of disappointing, is that he doesn't have a voice. I mean, why not have Corey Burton come back, much like how he did in G1? After all, there was that famous quote of his, "Clarity of thought before ration of action." I mean, why not have anything like that in live action? But in any case, though, I'm certainly not done with the characters. We once again have the likes of Optimus Prime, Sideswipe, Bumblebee, Ironhide, and all that good stuff. They've all retained their original actors, from Peter Cullen to Jess Harnell, but Sideswipe has a different actor in this instance, James Remar, as opposed to Andre Sagliuzzo from the second film. And then, of course, there's the introduction of even more Autobot characters. You have Dino, who transforms into a Ferrari, voiced by the almighty Francesco Quinn, who unfortunately has since left. Rest in peace. And then, of course, you have the scientist character known by the name of Q, who is, of course, played by George Coe, who also had unfortunately died. So, two things rather tragic. I guess you could say that voicing these two characters probably put a curse on them to not live long. But I guess that's also up for speculation by this point. A lot of it as well. Originally, the likes of Dino and Q were actually meant to be more of Wheeljack and Mirage, and as you probably would remember from the Dark of the Moon video game, the Dino character is officially called Mirage, but in the movie, he's just called Dino. But many people would probably agree he should have been known as Mirage, canonically, and Q probably should have been Wheeljack just the same. Because after all, they do have their respective roles. You got Mirage, who is stylish, is able to turn invisible, and even utilize some pretty insane weaponry. So, definitely Mirage right up there, especially with the cloaking technique. And then you have Q, the Wheeljack, basically, whom, of course, is a scientist, much like Ratchet. And so, again, I don't know what the deal is with all these different names and all this confusion between identity and whatnot. But it is what it is. We can't change what happened then, and we probably can't do much about it today. We probably could re-release Dark of the Moon as a special edition and have some fix-ups take place, like voice recognition of some sort. Yeah. I guess it would be a little too complicated to pull off considering how big the movie is. And also the budget. It's astoundingly high. Knowing that the budget of the first film and second film combined were already big enough to create dozens of big pieces that happened during those times, Dark of the Moon overshadows them by a long shot. No doubt because of how much money the last two films made, so they were able to expand the budget and multiply it even higher. And so, that only leads us to wonder, what was the box office like? Well, guess what? It's over $1 billion. And that makes it the highest grossing film of the franchise thus far. Also one of the highest grossing movies in history. Dark of the Moon having over $1 billion in the box office doesn't entirely make it like Titanic or Avatar, which were both James Cameron masterpieces, but Dark of the Moon still did manage to get pretty close, by all accounts. And so, when you get down to it, the math is just immense. A lot of people out there might not understand the magnitude of the situation at hand, but you know what? I'm probably getting a little too off track here. Hugo Weaving does return as Megatron, Charlie Adler as Starscream, and then Shockwave. Again, he doesn't have a voice. But hey, Soundwave is back as well, and he takes on a new form, being voiced by his respective actor, Frank Welker. This is the only other example of a character with its appropriate actor. Of course, Peter Cullen as Optimus Prime was the only other Prime example, no pun intended. But the thing is, Soundwave being voiced by Frank Welker at least is quite faithful to that of G1, in comparison to every other actor and character in mind. Bumblebee is again voiceless. So, again, I don't know what's holding them back from allowing Bumblebee to speak like he should be. Anyways though, for the plot line, as I've mentioned before, Shockwave and the Driller are basically brought down, and eventually they're being studied and monitored by the Autobots. As I've mentioned before, the likes of NEST, which was an organization from the US military, specifically made for the studies of Autobot and Decepticon related activity, and of course to assist in the warfare against the Decepticon army and Megatron. But as time goes on, alongside with Sam Witwicky's normal life, along with his new girlfriend and his full-time job and whatnot in Chicago, they basically discover a certain thing out there in space. It turns out there's a little secret to the dark side of the moon. And you know what? This actually does help build significance to the title. Much like Revenge of the Fallen, you have a Decepticon character known by the name of the Fallen, and he seeks revenge against the Autobots for the Allspark. But in this case, we have the Dark of the Moon literally implying to the title once again. So that at least helps to make sense as to what the subtitle truly means. So that's at least one big positive that I can give to them. Proper consistency as well as appropriation given the words of the subtitle itself. The context that it builds up is essentially this secret was actually a former ancient powerful leader of the Autobots. Sentinel Prime. Yeah, you heard me right. There was another Prime, and as we've pretty much come to know throughout Transformers history as well as lore over the years, Sentinel Prime is only a handful of various Primes that have led the Autobots over the years against the Decepticon army. Of course, there were other Primes that came along, including Zeta Prime, whom at the time was actually featured in the game Transformers War for Cybertron, which came out the year before in 2010. And interesting to note, there actually was a mini-series, which was basically a crappy Transformers series. It was made more or less exclusive to YouTube and had a number of short episodes, but nobody needs to talk about crappy can of worms material like that, especially when it barely even qualifies as a functioning series. Anyways though, as Dark of the Moon continues with Sentinel Prime being recovered, he's reactivated, and he basically gives some helpful insight as to what goes on for the future of the Decepticons. He also gives proper explanation to us about who he is. And wouldn't you believe, his voice is probably one of the best things about his existence in this film. Spock's own Leonard Nimoy plays Sentinel Prime. That was one amazing thing about this movie. A legendary actor from Star Trek is right here in another sci-fi series. And just to know the fact that Leonard Nimoy already had a lot of Spock-related stuff going on with the Star Trek films that were still ongoing by the year 2011, and just to know the fact this was 2 years before Star Trek Into Darkness, which so far has been the best one that I've seen, but again, this was before all that happened. And more importantly, 4 years would pass until this film came out, and he died in 2015. Only 4 years later. So think about this for a minute. Isn't it true that perhaps Transformers was actually the reason why so many popular actors over the years have died? Is it possible that Transformers had not only killed the careers of some people, but also taken lives? I honestly wouldn't be that surprised. Considering how terrible we've known of Victor Salva's work over the years, and all the crap he's put people through all these years, I, again, wouldn't be surprised if Michael Bay was more or less capable of those same exact issues in life. Well, anyways, Sentinel Prime, again, he becomes an important asset, not only for the cast, but also for the plot itself. He basically goes so far to give us the insight that we're looking for as to what the Decepticons were truly planning. And it turns out there actually was a series of plans to somehow bring back Cybertron. The very same Cybertron that had unfortunately been left abandoned. Pretty much because of the Allspark, but yet the planet itself was still intact nonetheless. Well, guess what? As time goes on, the battles rage on. Sentinel takes the form of an airport fire truck compared to everybody else. But guess what? There's a big thing that takes place here. During the last 30 minutes or so with the film itself, Sentinel betrays the Autobots. Yeah. This was probably one of the most impressive things they might have pulled off. They had the guts to put off a big character like Sentinel Prime, not only because of his size, but also for a number of other things. And he had them kill Ironhide. Of all the Autobots they could have killed, it had to be Ironhide. Wow. That was insane. But you know what? It actually does make even more sense. So that's probably another positive right there. Because after all, this wasn't the first time that Ironhide, a major character in the cast, was actually killed off. Well, there was the 1986 film where he was shot down by Megatron's fusion cannon pretty early on, actually. And the fact that he survived for 2.5 films up until this very point where he got shot several times by acid from Sentinel before he retreats out into the distance, man, like I said, talk about having some serious balls to kill off a major character. And even more so knowing the fact a lot of people have actually died since the film came out. Anyways, it's regarded that Prime is in fact a traitor on this point. And Optimus, well, what does he have to do? He has to not only stop the threat of the Decepticons, but he's also got Sentinel to worry about. Because there's basically an affair he's had with the Decepticons. More importantly, this was some kind of plan that he had for a long time, supposedly without the Autobots even discovering anything about it before then. And even after they had him brought from the moon to Earth and reactivated, he still basically had no intention of telling him, at least until the very last second. Man. So you know what though? This is impressive. Certainly one of the best ways to get our senses rolling. I mean, you got Ironhide being killed by another major character, a massive betrayal within the Autobot ranks. And of course Nest, obviously. So this means all Allied forces are now looking on Prime as a threat. But in any case though, it's up to Optimus, Bumblebee, Mirage, or everybody else pretty much to go and take on the Decepticons themselves. There's basically a trio known by the name of Crankcase and Crowbar, and yeah, and it's basically triplets in a way. Decepticon war dogs of some sorts, in which the Autobots duke it out on the highway, which was pretty awesome to look at. Especially with the unique dialogue exchange, complete with a Mexican standoff between Ironhide and Sideswipe and two of the remaining triplets, you know. So of course it's because Dino was able to take out one of them. And like I said, there's lots of great moments in this film that at least do help us know the fact that this is a Michael Bay production. It was Transformers, of all things they could have done with it. And of course, Bay did give out this sort of auteur stamp. So, what else could I possibly say? Well, we could talk a bit about the ending itself. Optimus and Sentinel duke it out with each other, permanently declaring on the fact that Optimus is not going to tolerate a betrayal within his own ranks. Knowing Ironhide's death was pretty horrible, even for us fans to watch. In a similar sense to how he was killed off in the '86 film, well, it's just nice he was able to survive longer at least. Unlike Jazz, which certainly was even bigger of a character than Ironhide, but still, I really feel like that they could have had some rethinking done to it. And within the end, well, when Wiki's new girlfriend is able to convince Megatron about this little thing that Sentinel has, and well, it turns out he might be right. Sentinel has pretty much no intention of allowing anyone to try and reclaim his little plan. He wants to restore Cybertron and allow them to pretty much converge on the Earth. And well, Optimus certainly does not want that to happen. He knows the humans are good. Why else are they allied with him and the rest of the Autobots? But in any case though, it's not Optimus that takes down Sentinel because one of his arms gets chopped off and all that. Nah, Megatron comes in almost not surprisingly. Only because, well, she taught about what had happened and what was going to happen. So Megatron puts some shots in Sentinel and weakens him just enough for Optimus to basically grab onto the axe and shove it on Megatron's head. And unlike when an Allspark was pushed into his chest and he was also severely damaged in Revenge of the Fallen, in this case he gets decapitated. So again, have some serious balls right there. And well, this means Megatron is defeated a third time now. But all that's left now is to finish off Sentinel, but not before some more words are exchanged. He had to explain why he betrayed Optimus. And as we know, he didn't exactly betray Optimus. He didn't really betray anybody, except himself. That's a line I feel like that's not only going to stick with us today, but probably for a long time. Even after 13 long years, while I might have some major disagreements with the film itself, it's at least notable knowing that there's been lots of things to help make sense, and a lot of connections to that of older Transformers continuities that basically helps make this film succeed in many different ways. It's no wonder why it earned over $1 billion in the box office, and I feel like that with all things that have been put together here, this was more than just a trilogy. It had lots of things out there, lots of potential, lots of abilities to pretty much act upon old and new fans alike, means to bring us together. Like it's Transformers 1986, but many years after that. Like this definitely could have felt like something you probably would have been able to put together in the fashion that G1 would have been the main target. Like they probably could have just had something made by like the 80s time. But hey, Bumblebee was technically made more for that kind of thing. Whereas Michael Bay just did what he had to. Set everything in the present, put a lot of liberties into the franchise, and swapped out most actors, which technically were more or less talented than in comparison to their original counterparts. So, it's a trilogy, alright. But who would have thought there actually would have been more of them? as I've said before, The Last Knight had already been talked about, and I don't really intend on going that far into that point again, because The Last Knight seemed about as worthwhile as a number of different things in life that we've had that were extremely problematic. And also, knowing the fact we're going to have another Transformers film later on anyways, it really does make you wonder, what could we expect from another Transformers installment? But this one's going to be more or less about the origins. So, I don't have very low expectations on that part, but in any case though, I'd say this film does pretty well on its part and probably is only worth a 7.1 out of 10.1 by my counts because, well, life is certainly much better than anything that media could possibly offer. So, I will in fact come around again with the fourth film. And trust me when I say, I'm going to have a lot to talk about on that part. So maybe this will be a lot longer than even here, where I've already wasted a lot of time with all kinds of jargon and all kinds of stuff here and there. So make sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side for more.
I want you, but I don't have you yet. I ain't got no tricks to be playing on you.